So I ran a little experiment with case airflow. First, I set up 3 fans on the front for intake, another one fan on the top for intake, and the top left fan plus the rear fan for exhaust. The problem with this setup here is that you kind of have a dead circle up top, because the air that is getting taken in is shortly thereafter being exhausted by the top left fan. And so people argue that this air does not reach the CPU and it does not pass through the CPU. Also, there's a problem with top fans being used for intake because they bring in a lot of extra dust into your case. However, when I tested this setup for gaming, and I'll be showing you later the performance I got out of Cyberpunk on ultra settings at 2K resolution, the results are actually quite surprising. I'm comparing this to a more classic setup, which is 3 intake fans, 1 rear exhaust fan and 1 exhaust fan on top. There is no dead circle when you have 3 or 2 fans intaking air from the front, and then 1 fan taking it out from the rear and 1 fan taking it out from the top left, and that should perform better, right? I noticed about a 10% degree difference between the first setup with the extra fan taking in air from the top and the second setup without this fan, only the exhaust on the top. The fan curve you set in your BIOS affects this nearly as much, if not more. I mean, you could be getting an extra fan putting it up top, but just as well, if your fans are not properly optimized, you'll be losing out a lot of the performance and a lot of the cooling you could be getting out of your fans. So choosing the appropriate fan curve is just as important as setting up these fans, and as long as you have a positive pressure, which means having slightly more intake fans than exhaust fans to push air out of unfiltered gaps, you should be good to go. Make sure, of course, that your cooler is facing where the air is being taken in by the fans so that the air passes through it, taking out the hot air blowing out of the back and the top left. Overall, in my experience with this experiment, leads me to conclude is that you could use an additional intake fan from the top if you're not worried about dust. It actually does provide a lower temperature, although it's debatable here. For example, it could be that I'm getting more frame rates from the setup without the extra top intake. I'm getting extra frame rates at the cost of the increased temperatures, and playing out with the fan curves could also provide very different results. In general, both of these setups work excellently,